The galactic cruiser Vornithus Pride sliced silently through the fabric of deep space, its massive hull bristling with armaments, hangar bays, and shimmering energy shields. The Drakari Imperium had built it to be a symbol of dominance, a floating fortress, capable of deploying planetary invasions at a moment's notice. To the Drakari crew, the humans aboard were barely worth acknowledgement. Among them, one human stood out, for how utterly unremarkable he was. His name was Mark Teller. His job: janitor. The aliens laughed behind his back. "Look at him," hissed Commander Kraxel, his mandibles clicking in amusement as his twin eye stalks followed Mark pushing his cleaning bot down the corridor. The species that once dared challenge the stars. Reduced to this. A fitting role for vermin, sneered Lieutenant Dravik. Scrubbing floors while the Drakari conquer. Mark didn't respond. He rarely did. His face was passive, his posture subservient. But inside, his mind was always recording, always watching. He swept the decks of hangar bays where fighters launched with precision drills. He cleaned plasma conduits along the power distribution hubs. He was assigned to maintain the waste recycling units near the weapons arrays, not because the Drakari trusted him, but because those zones were so toxic no Drakari wanted the job. And that was their first mistake. A quiet beginning. Mark Teller had not always been a janitor. Back on Earth, he had been a systems engineer, a specialist in fusion cores, AI subroutines, and gravitic modulation systems. But after the Drakari Empire had invaded Earth during the Third Galactic Conflict, Mark was one of the billions taken prisoner and repurposed. Human engineers were stripped of rank and dignity. Most resisted. Many died. Mark took a different approach: submission. The Drakari saw compliance as weakness. Mark saw it as camouflage. The secret of the ship. Vornithus Pride wasn't just any warship. It was a flagship designed to lead a new campaign. The Drakari had turned their attention toward the neutral sectors, rich in resources, lightly defended, and home to many small civilizations who had neither the military might nor alliances to resist. The Sovereign Council had issued multiple warnings to the Drakari. They had been ignored. War was inevitable. But inside Vornithus Pride, Mark Teller was already preparing for something different. As he moved along the maintenance shafts, patching coolant leaks and calibrating magnetic filters, he memorized the ship's schematics. Power junctions, shield capacitors, weapon coolant lines, hyperdrive stabilizers, backup systems. He knew it all. The Drakari may have been superior warriors, but they had grown arrogant. Their technology was more advanced, but they relied on automated protocols written centuries earlier, protocols Mark could manipulate. The spark. One evening, as Mark was scrubbing the deck beneath the central command chamber, two senior officers discussed the upcoming campaign. Mark kept his head down, but his ears were sharply tuned. "Once we crush the Kilari Confederacy," said Admiral Vorith, "Earth's remnants will have no allies left." "What of the Sovereign Council's threats?" asked Subcommander Zell. "Empty words," Vorith chuckled. "They fear war. They will watch as we dismantle another sector." Mark's jaw clenched slightly, but he didn't respond. He remained invisible beneath their notice. Later that night, in the dim privacy of his maintenance closet, Mark activated a small hidden console he had cobbled together from scrap, a forbidden human-made interface. "Time to start Phase 1, he whispered. Phase 1, the testing. Over the next 2 weeks, Mark tested the Drakari systems. He introduced minute fluctuations in power regulation to observe system redundancy. He altered pressure readings in auxiliary coolant lines to see how quickly the automated systems compensated. He rewired non-critical lighting grids to reroute minor energy drains, invisible to the bridge crew. All small things. All tests. The Drakari never noticed. They chalked up every anomaly to maintenance hiccups, to aging systems, or blamed junior technicians. After all, who would suspect the janitor? Mark was learning the warship's rhythm, the subtle flaws, the blind spots even its engineers didn't know. The catalyst arrives. Then came the moment that accelerated his plans. The Drakari announced a prisoner transfer. Hundreds of captured humans and other species were being brought aboard Vornithus Pride to be redistributed as labor. Mark saw it as an opportunity. Among the new arrivals was a face he recognized: Captain Kara Miles, former officer of Earth's Defense Fleet. The guards shoved her into a cell block, her uniform tattered but her eyes blazing with unbroken spirit. Mark waited until nightfall, disguised as part of the maintenance crew, and slipped a small transmitter into her cell. When the tiny device activated, Kara blinked, surprised as Mark's voice whispered through the earpiece. "Kara. It's Mark Teller." "Teller? You're alive?" she whispered back. Alive. And working on something. Something big. You're cleaning floors? And watching. Listening. Mapping. You have a plan? Not yet. But we're going to take this ship. The invisible resistance. Mark continued his work, more methodical than ever. Each day he discreetly linked prisoners into a growing network. Human engineers disguised as kitchen staff. Zarn biospecialists assigned to sewage processing. Kilari hackers forced into menial data archival. Each member was carefully briefed through coded messages Mark slipped into food rations, toolkits, or repair assignments. The resistance grew quietly inside the belly of the beast. The laugh before the storm. As the Drakari prepared for the assault on the Kilari Confederacy, Admiral Vorath threw a grand feast. The ship's officers drank and laughed while mocking their slaves. Mark was ordered to serve drinks during the ceremony. As he moved between the tables, he heard the jeers directly. Be grateful, human, a Drakari noble roared. You get to witness the birth of a new empire. A janitor's purpose fulfilled, keeping our floors clean for conquest. Mark simply smiled and bowed. Of course, Excellency. But as he left the chamber, his smile faded into a steel gaze. Enjoy your feast, he whispered. Because tomorrow, everything changes. The corridors of Vornitha's Pride were unusually quiet the next morning. The crew were still nursing the aftereffects of last night's celebration, bloated with pride and liquor. The mood aboard was festive, oblivious. They were days away from their invasion jump toward the Kilari Confederacy. And in those fragile hours Mark Teller made his move. The trigger. Mark walked calmly toward Sublevel 7, one of the few areas forbidden to Drakari crew unless escorted. Waste Reprocessing Core. That was his assigned zone. Ironically, it was also where most of the ship's auxiliary life support systems intersected, a minor but crucial oversight. He keyed his stolen maintenance code into the control panel. The door hissed open. Inside, several of his network members waited, prisoners assigned to sewage maintenance, dressed in filthy overalls. But their eyes gleamed with quiet determination. Captain Kara Miles was among them, now posing as a waste management technician. Her fierce military discipline remained intact despite her disguise. We're in position, Mark, she whispered. Good. Initiate the relay tap. The Kilari slicer, Nethari, activated a spindly device made from salvaged components. Its slender arms inserted microspikes into the nearby data conduits, feeding data directly into the encrypted subnetwork Mark had secretly built over months. Tapping into power grids, accessing control relays, backdoors live. Mark nodded. His calm never wavered. Don't access central controls yet, he warned. We can't tip them off. Phase 1 is still data accumulation. The real strike comes later. Understood, Nethari replied. But the window won't last long. That's why we work fast. Mark's hand tightened briefly around the small data pad at his waist, an ancient Earth device he had modified to run human-coded infiltration algorithms invisible to Drakari security, mapping the beast's throat. For the next 72 hours, the resistance worked tirelessly beneath the Drakari's oblivious eyes. Using covert routines Mark's network mapped. Shield modulation harmonics. Energy reserves for hyperdrives. Thermal vent cycles for weapon cores. Drone patrol schedules. Emergency override redundancies. With every byte of stolen data, the real weakness of Vornitha's Pride became visible, not in its systems alone but in its arrogance. They never built this ship to defend against an internal attack, Kara observed. Of course not, Mark replied. Why would gods fear the ants underfoot? Ants bite, she smiled coldly. We're about to sting. The ticking clock. But time was not their ally. The fleet's invasion countdown was moving. Within 4 days the Drakari would launch their assault on the Kilari Confederacy. And once that war began, the galaxy would burn again. Millions would die. Mark refused to let it happen. The plan had to accelerate. We strike in 48 hours, Mark declared to his covert team inside the narrow tunnels of Deck 9's maintenance vent. The room fell into a tense silence. We're not ready, Nethari objected. There's still data we haven't cracked. If we wait any longer it won't matter, Mark said firmly. They'll launch and then it'll be too late. We have one shot. We cripple the Pride, disable its systems and send a message. And if it fails? Kara asked, voice low. Mark looked at her without hesitation. Then we die. But not as slaves. The weight of his words settled over the team like gravity. None objected further. The Janitor's playbook. Overnight, Mark finalized the strike plan, Operation Clean Sweep. Stage 1. Isolate internal communication relays to prevent Drakari officers from coordinating. Stage 2. Disable weapons and shield systems by exploiting their unstable power regulation nodes. Stage 3. Hijack environmental controls to neutralize hostile resistance without full-blown ship destruction. Stage 4. Seize the bridge and broadcast a surrender demand galaxy-wide. Simple. Efficient. Surgical. Clean. The infiltration begins. The strike began under the cover of routine maintenance schedules. Netheri's slicers disabled auxiliary cameras. Human engineers rerouted maintenance drones to flood non-critical decks. Air recycling was subtly adjusted to induce minor disorientation in guard patrols. Power was gradually shifted from weapons to life support backups, appearing to the main system as normal recalibrations. Kara led a tactical assault squad disguised as janitorial replacements. Hidden stun guns and shock blades were concealed in their vac suit gear. The first confrontation. Their first major obstacle came at the security core on Deck 3. 2 squads of Drakari enforcers guarded the chamber, armed with pulse lances and armored exocets. Had Mark attacked head-on, his people would have been massacred. But he didn't believe in frontal assaults. Instead, using the maintenance tunnels, his team vented a microdose of neurodisruptive gas, harmless to humans but debilitating to the Drakari's delicate equilibrium glands. Within minutes, the guards collapsed in twitching heaps. Security core is ours, Kara reported. Initiate lockdown of internal comms, Mark ordered. Nethari activated his slicer node. Across the warship, communications failed. Bridge officers panicked as ship-wide messaging scrambled into static. Admiral Vorith slammed his fists into the armrest. What is happening? Unknown failure in internal relays, Admiral, a terrified officer cried. Then fix it. But they couldn't. The janitor had already cleaned house. Bridge control. With the lower decks secured and systems in disarray, Mark's assault team advanced toward the heart of Vornitha's pride, the bridge. The Drakari fought back savagely. Resistance squads managed to regroup, creating brutal choke points. Plasma bolts lit the darkened corridors as Kara's team engaged in deadly close-quarters combat. Mark personally led the charge into the final control chamber. 2 of his team went down as Drakari pulse blasts sliced through the air. But Kara and Mark pushed forward, flanking the officers from side vents designed for ventilation access, places only a janitor would have studied exhaustively. Admiral Vorith drew his personal energy blade as Mark entered the bridge. You! Vorith bellowed. The human janitor? Mark didn't flinch. That's right, Admiral, Mark said coldly. The janitor. Vorith lunged. But Mark wasn't untrained. Months of preparation and desperate training had honed him. Kara intercepted the strike, parrying the energy blade while Mark ducked under and drove a stun pulse into Vorith's gut. The Drakari leader collapsed, convulsing. The bridge was theirs. The message to the galaxy. Mark activated the galactic comms array, bypassing the encrypted codes. His face, a simple human janitor, now appeared across thousands of star systems. To every free world, to every species watching, the Drakari Empire's flagship has fallen. Not by armies, not by fleets, but by those you dismissed. He glanced at Vortha's unconscious form. You mocked humanity. You enslaved us. But you forgot one thing. Janitors don't just clean. We see every flaw, every crack. And when we strike, we make sure it's permanent. The war isn't over yet. But today, the tide has turned. Across the stars, oppressed species erupted in hope. Rebellions ignited. Allies rallied. The Drakari Empire would never recover. Aftermath of the broadcast. Mark stood on the bridge of Vornitha's pride, his chest heaving. Sweat clung to his skin, but his eyes burned with cold fire. The message he had sent to the galaxy rippled outward like a solar flare. Rebellion flags lit up across star systems where the Drakari had ruled unchallenged for generations. Uprisings sparked on fringe colonies, where long-oppressed species now dared to defy their masters. The Drakari Empire's control grid began fracturing, not from military defeat, but from within. They had always ruled by fear. Now that fear had shifted directions. Sir, Nethari called from the comms console, incoming messages from 23 independent factions. They want to coordinate. Good, Mark said. Let them know we're ready. We've also intercepted Drakari fleet transmissions. They're mobilizing. Dozens of warships. Of course they are, Kara said grimly. Let them come, Mark replied. The more they send, the more they'll bleed. The hunt begins. The first Drakari counteroffensive was brutal. Fleet Lord Malgrith, Vorith's second-in-command, scrambled 5 battle groups toward Vornith's Pride. Their strategy was simple: retake the flagship, capture or kill the rebels, and erase the embarrassment before it spread any further. But Mark had prepared for this. In the days following the initial seizure, Vornith's Pride had been reconfigured into something terrifying: a trap. The ship's auto-defense AI had been completely rewritten by human programmers smuggled aboard. The warp engines had been subtly overcharged, enabling unpredictable hyperspace jumps that disoriented tracking fleets. Dozens of external decoy drones now mimicked the Pride's signature, scattering Drakari pursuit efforts. The flagship no longer sailed alone. With Netheri's help, Mark had forged the beginnings of a guerrilla fleet: dozens of commandeered cargo freighters, mining vessels, and privateer ships, all retrofitted with stolen Drakari weapons. Small, fast, deadly. They didn't face the Empire head-on. Instead, they bled it dry from 1,000 cuts. The Janitor's strategy. Mark had no illusions. He couldn't match the Drakari's raw firepower. What he could match was knowledge. Every maintenance shaft, every reactor cycle, every blind spot in their sensor nets, he knew them all. "We clean what others ignore," he had once said. "Now we strike where others never look." The rebel fleet struck fuel depots, disabled communication relays, hacked supply routes. The Drakari's sprawling empire, dependent on logistics and centralized control, began to wither. And each time a Drakari captain mocked them, "They're led by a janitor." They paid for that arrogance with burning ships and lost worlds. Empire in panic. Inside the Drakari High Command Chamber on Sarith Prime, the mood had shifted from outrage to desperation. Holographic projections showed star systems blinking out of their control one after another. Admiral Malgrith slammed his fist into the war table. How is this possible? He was nothing. A human janitor. High Priestess Valera spoke in hushed tones, her reptilian eyes wide. "Perhaps that was our mistake. We saw him as unworthy. We forgot the most dangerous predators often come from where we least expect. He's destabilizing the very structure of our empire." Exactly. He's not fighting for control, he's dismantling the machine itself. The turning point: Siege of Karshath. The final catalyst came at Karshath, a heavily fortified fuel refinery world critical to Drakari war efforts. Mark's fleet could not match its planetary defenses directly. Instead, they launched Operation Spillover. Using their hacked command protocols, rebel slicers triggered the refinery's own defense drones to misfire, opening temporary gaps. Netheri's infiltration team rerouted docking sequences, allowing disguised cargo ships to slip inside. Dozens of rebel squads, engineers, janitors, medics, flooded the station. The Drakari defenders were overwhelmed from within, unable to comprehend how their fortified bastion was collapsing without a proper siege. Karshath fell in less than 6 hours. The loss rippled like a detonation through the Empire's war economy. The psychological war. Mark understood something far more powerful than battle tactics: narrative control. Each victory was accompanied by viral broadcasts. Captured footage showed human laborers, once mopping floors, now commanding starships. Former slaves now issued orders to trembling Drakari officers. "You feared our warriors. You mocked our laborers," Mark said in one broadcast. "Now both have risen. And you will answer for centuries of cruelty." Alien species long subjugated by the Drakari saw in Mark not just a symbol of rebellion, but of inevitable change. His story was being told across millions of data streams. The janitor who broke the Empire. The Council fractures. Back on Sarith Prime, the Drakari Council began eating itself. Some called for negotiation, fearing total collapse. Others demanded full genocide against humanity. Many simply resigned, fleeing with personal wealth into deep space. Admiral Malgrith grew increasingly isolated as his commanders lost faith. "We must crush him," Malgrith roared. But no one followed his orders anymore. The final authority of the Empire, once absolute, had eroded into paranoia and impotence. The return to Sarith Prime. Finally, Mark delivered the unthinkable: a direct assault on the Drakari capital. The rebel fleet arrived not with overwhelming force, but with overwhelming precision. Decoy signals flooded local sensors. Gravity mines crippled defensive satellites. Viral codes shut down planetary shield relays. Small tactical teams infiltrated key government buildings while the remaining Drakari elite fled like rats abandoning a sinking ship. Admiral Malgrith was captured alive inside the High Council chamber, standing alone beneath the towering pillars of Drakari rule. As Mark entered, Malgrith sneered. "Enjoy your moment, human. You're still nothing but a janitor." Mark smiled calm. "Exactly." He signaled Kara. The last Drakari war banners were pulled down. Sarath Prime fell without a single planetary bombardment. The birth of the Alliance. Weeks later, the Free Species Alliance was formally declared. The Drakari Empire was dissolved. Former slaves became citizens. Dozens of species united under a new interstellar charter. At the heart of it stood Mark Teller, the janitor who rewrote history. "We were overlooked because we cleaned your messes," Mark declared. "Now we clean the galaxy of tyranny." He never accepted political leadership. Instead, he founded a Peace Corps of engineers, training laborers, janitors, technicians from all species, turning overlooked workers into protectors of freedom. One last threat. Peace did not come easily, nor did victory mark the true end. In the shadows beyond known star charts, the last embers of the Drakari's power smoldered. The Red Talon Syndicate, an extremist faction of exiled warlords and mercenaries, refused to accept the collapse of their old empire. They had no fleets left, no planets, but they had stolen technology, desperation, and most dangerously, nothing left to lose. Their plan was monstrous. A doomsday weapon, the Sunbreaker Array, an experimental gravitational weapon capable of collapsing stars into black holes, erasing entire systems. And their first target was Earth. The message. Mark received the transmission aboard the Unity Dawn, the flagship of the new Alliance fleet. The holographic projection of Red Talon leader Skarn hissed with venom. "You thought yourselves free? You thought your janitor could erase centuries of dominance? Watch as your precious Earth is devoured. We may fall, but we will drag humanity into the void with us." For the first time since this war began, Mark's calm exterior faltered. "They're targeting home," Kara whispered, her knuckles white. Mark nodded. "Then this ends now. The race against time." The Unity Dawn surged into hyperspace. Earth's defenses, though advanced, could not withstand a gravitational weapon of this magnitude. If the Sunbreaker reached position, it would ignite the solar system's death spiral. Mark coordinated fleets with cold precision. Allied species deployed scout wings. Human engineers hacked into Red Talon's communications. Janitors, miners, and even former slaves volunteered en masse, ready to fight beside their liberator. This wasn't just a military operation, it was personal. "They want to make a statement," Mark told his officers. "Let's make ours louder." The battle for Sol. As the Unity Dawn emerged near the Sol Gate, they saw it. A massive, spiked station the size of a small moon, Sunbreaker humming with stolen energy preparing to fire. Red Talon warships formed a desperate defensive wall. The Alliance struck like a blade. Human fighter squadrons, vultures, ravens, and falcons, swarmed the Talon ships with precision strikes. Years of laborious maintenance taught these pilots exactly where to hit. Coolant junctions, sensor clusters, exposed reactor vents. On the ground, boarding teams led by former janitors stormed the Sunbreaker's access rings. Mark himself led the main assault team. Inside the Sunbreaker, the interior was a maze of twisting corridors, malfunctioning gravity, and unstable power conduits. "Mark, we're losing containment fields," Kara shouted as plasma storms arced dangerously close. "Keep moving," Mark barked. "We get to the core. No matter what." They reached the control chamber where Skarn waited, flanked by his final guards. "You should have stayed in your mop closet, human," Skarn sneered. Mark stepped forward. "You should have cleaned your own mess, Skarn." The firefight was brutal. But Mark's team had something the Red Talon never understood, resolve born of years of being underestimated. One by one, Skarn's guards fell. The final confrontation. Skarn lunged, desperate, wielding a blade. Mark sidestepped with unexpected agility, honed from years of dodging hazards in dangerous maintenance bays. With a fluid motion, Mark disarmed him and pinned him to the deck. "It's over," Mark said. "You've lost." "I may die," Skarn hissed, "but others will rise." Mark stared coldly. "Not if we give them no more monsters to follow." With Kara's help, they initiated the Sunbreaker's shutdown sequence. The gravitational surge dissipated. Earth was safe. The galaxy watches. News of the Sunbreaker's destruction spread faster than light. In the council hall, the same chamber where Earth had once been mocked and humiliated, ambassadors now stood and applauded as Mark addressed the galaxy. "You thought janitors were nothing," Mark said calmly, his voice echoing across star systems. "We clean. We repair. And when you spill blood and sow chaos, We clean that too. We will build a galaxy where no species lives in chains. Where every worker, every citizen, every forgotten soul knows they are never beneath notice. The Alliance seal lit up behind him, a symbol of unity forged in defiance. The true legacy. Mark refused titles, crowns, or monuments. Instead, he returned to the orbital training platforms where he helped establish the Interstellar Maintenance and Defense Corps, a multi-species organization dedicated to empowering engineers, workers, and technicians to defend their worlds. There will always be tyrants, he said to new recruits. But there will always be janitors too, cleaning up after them. The words became legend. Entire generations of children, human and alien alike, would grow up dreaming not of being emperors or warlords, but of being janitors, technicians, and guardians like Mark Teller, the janitor who won the war. Epilogue and call to subscribe. And so, the galaxy changed forever, not through fleets or empires, but through one overlooked man who refused to stay small when destiny called. If you've enjoyed this story of resilience, courage, and the ultimate humanity, SCI-FI spirit, make sure to subscribe to the Void Narratives for more epic tales where humanity rises, surprises, and rewrites the galaxy's rules.